Welcome to the Chess Angle. This is not your typical chess podcast. If you're an amateur or club-level player, the Chess Angle is for you. Our content is aimed at busy adults who are serious about the game but have limited study time. Featured guests include both amateur and titled players alike. And now, here's your host, Director of the Long Island Chess Club, Neal Bellon.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. It is season 8. It's going to be great. All right, that's my rhyme for the day. Anyway, great to be back. This episode is going to be divided into 3 parts. First, I'm going to make some quick introductory remarks, speak a little bit about what I'm doing this summer. Second, some housekeeping, if you will, on the direction of this podcast moving forward, and some thoughts on the chess content creation space in general, and some thoughts on chess improvement. And then finally, we'll end with a discussion of the King's Indian attack, which is an easy-to-learn system opening for white. So we'll talk about that at the end. So during the break, took a few weeks off there. One thing I did, which I'm probably, 10, 15 years overdue in doing, I actually decluttered my closet and my dresser. I Marie Kondoed all my clothes. So I had like just jeans and shirts and, just things that just don't fit me anymore, but are still in good shape. I have to concede that I'm not going to be a 31 or a 32-inch waist anymore. So anyway, I had about maybe 6 or 7 of those kitchen size bags, like those garbage bags, full of clothes then, and I donated them, of course. I mean, I would never throw them out. That's a sin. They just didn't fit me. The clothes are in good shape, but I really decluttered a lot of stuff that's just been sitting there for years, donated it all. There's actually a donation bin at the church where the club meets. I decluttered, felt better about that, and I'm happy to, help those less fortunate who could use it. But that was sort of my summer household project that I was way overdue in doing. So anyway, as far as chess, my summer project, so to speak, I have a little more time over the summer. I've been reading The World's Most Instructive Amateur Game Book by Dan Heisman. It is outstanding. It's excellent. I'm somewhat embarrassed. I didn't really know about this or read it sooner. Now, this is one of those books. I actually bought it a while ago from Amazon. It had appeared in my Amazon feed, like recommended for you. And of course, Dan Heisman is great. And I'm looking at it and, seems like an interesting cover. It was one of those books where I bought it and then it just kind of sat on my shelf. Yeah, I'll get to it, right? We all do that as chess players. Think about how many books you probably have that you bought and you haven't even read yet. And if you remember in a previous episode, I said I wasn't buying any books or courses this year because I just had so much stuff already that I haven't gotten to, and I stuck with that. But anyway, this was one of those books that I bought and it sat there and I finally got around to it, and I'm beating myself up for not reading it sooner. It's excellent. It's right up there with The Amateur's Mind. Basically, there's 30 games in the book, 30 instructive games, and he includes a lot of explanatory prose where he explains the common mistakes and the thinking process. I'm about 7 games through it now. My goal is to finish it this summer. I'm doing about 1 game a day. I mean, I can't get to it every day, but about 1 game a day. So about a month or so to get through it. That's my goal. And it's really, really good. It's outstanding. I'm going to be doing a dedicated episode on this book. It's probably going to be coming up, if not next week, maybe the week after, probably the second or third episode from now, something like that. But anyway, it will be this season. I'm going to review this book, The World's Most Instructive Amateur Game Book by Dan Heisman. I'm really, really enjoying it. I can't remember the last time I had this much fun reading a book, and yet it's incredibly instructive. I wish I had done it sooner. But anyway, I'll save my thoughts on this when I do the episode reviewing that book. So anyway, my own chess progress, I'm starting to feel a little bit like a player again, and I'm kind of getting back into a study routine, as I mentioned. Now, I spoke about how I completed my doctoral degree That obviously caused my chess study to be put on hold, which is fine. That's not a complaint. That's my choice. I knew that going in. I'm glad I did it. I have no regrets, but that definitely put a dent in my chess progress. So I'm slowly working my way back to where I was because my rating took a little bit of a hit. At any rate, my own personal chess journey and my own personal rating swings, that's also going to be a future episode at some point. I don't know if it'll be this season, maybe, but that's something I'll save as well. So we got some good things coming up. Next week's episode is going to be about faulty study plans, or really types of chess study habits and exercises, things like that, that people do that I think are overrated, or things that they do and they're neglecting other things that I think are more helpful. That'll be next week's episode. So a little teaser there. And now a little bit of housekeeping on the podcast itself, some reminders, some call to action things. I generally save these for season premiere episodes, sometimes season finale episodes, because I don't want to hound people with this every week. You know that, but I just want to review a few things. Maybe some of you new to the pod may not be familiar. So first of all, before anything else, I want to say thank you. Thank you all for your support of the show, all the kind words. Please continue to spread the word. And if you're enjoying the show, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating on your podcast app of choice. It's greatly appreciated. It takes a few seconds. You just click that 5-star button. On Apple Podcasts, you can also leave written comments, like a written review if you want to. You don't have to. You could just click the 5-star rating and that's it. Spotify, same thing. Now, Spotify now, I believe, you can actually leave comments on specific episodes. That is a recent update if you're a Spotify person, which I am. But anyway, if you would give us a 5-star rating, it's greatly appreciated. Really helps promote the podcast and helps with visibility. Many of you have already, and I am highly, highly appreciative. So again, thank you, thank you, thank you. Our links, just to review real quick, these are always in the show notes. Our email address is info@thechessangle.com. I say our email address like it's going to, someone on my staff. It's just me. This is a one-man show. I am the we. So if you want to email me, I'm saying us. I sometimes speak in the, like it's plural. But anyway, info@thechessangle.com. It goes to me. If you have a question for me, or even better, a topic idea for the show, definitely email me. I can't promise that I'll use it on the show if it's something I feel doesn't quite fit, or if it's something I feel I'm not comfortable or qualified to speak about. I may not do it, but I definitely want to hear from you. Our website is thechessangle.com. I updated it a number of months ago. It's really, really nice. Every episode is there, the entire catalog. You can listen. You can also message me that way. There's a contact link. There is even a voicemail link. You can leave a voicemail message if you want. I know most people are not into that, but that would be kind of cool to play someone's message on the show if it applies. But anyway, everything's on the website, all the links. We're also on Twitter, or X as they now call it, @thechessangle. Although Twitter seems to be, I don't want to say dying out a little bit, but I don't know, it doesn't seem to be as popular as it used to be. Maybe that's my interpretation. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, we are on Twitter. So if you are a Twitter or X person, please be sure to follow us. We're also on YouTube. I do have the whole catalog on YouTube, and it's not a true YouTube channel. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that. What I mean is it's really a still image. It's not actual video, because that's a whole separate workflow and editing thing. And I don't want to get into that, at least not at this time. But our entire catalog is on YouTube. You can look for the Chess Angle podcast. There's also a link in the show notes, of course. And even though most of you are listening in an app on your phone, whatever it is, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever it might be, the next time you're on YouTube, if you could look for the Chess Angle podcast and just subscribe to the channel, just kind of helps promote it. I use the YouTube channel more as a search engine, more as a publicity thing. Like someone might find it on YouTube and say, oh, what's this? And then they go on Spotify and then follow us, or they go on Apple Podcasts and follow us. but they first learned about us on YouTube. So if it works that way, then I consider it a success. I don't really treat it like the way, a true YouTuber would. I'm not doing like professional thumbnails and, all this intense video and editing, at least at this time. But we do have a YouTube channel. It's there. Some people like to consume this content in that platform. And lastly, as far as links, I do have a Buy Me a Coffee page. What that is, it's just a way to say thank you. If you're interested, you can buy me a virtual coffee because I'm actually trying to cut back on coffee. I'm down to 1 cup a day, and sometime before the summer ends, I'm looking to quit completely. I'll probably speak about that in an upcoming episode. But anyway, if you want, I don't push these things. I don't mention it all the time. But if you want to buy me a virtual coffee as a way of saying thank you, you can do that. And the funds from that help support the show and help with overhead if you want. So that's there. Also, there is no more Patreon for this show. I sort of discontinued that. Basically, long story short, it didn't really fit the structure and the business/content model of this podcast. I don't believe in having any content behind a paywall, at least not for this podcast. There's no type of membership or anything. I don't have time or the interest, quite honestly, for like a Discord and all sorts of bonus content. I'm lucky to be able to get out 1 episode per week. Now, I may add a bonus episode here and there, not sure, but if I do, it would certainly not be behind a paywall. Also, Patreon changed their structure in 2 ways that I don't agree with, just my opinion, although a lot of other creators have expressed the same annoyance. They added a free option, which I wasn't crazy about, and I know a lot of other creators weren't as well. I mean, the whole point of Patreon was, to get some funds to support the podcast, and then they just added a free option. So some people jumped on that, and then they changed the formatting of their site as well. So I think Patreon probably works for creators who got in early a number of years ago when it was kind of still a novelty. But for me, I'm going to be just stepping away from it, and I wanted to clarify that. On some of the older episodes, I didn't remove the links. I wasn't about to go back and manually take the link out from each episode. I probably should, but in case you go to our back catalog, if you click on Patreon, I don't know, nothing will probably happen. That link will be broken. But obviously for the newer episodes, I took it out. So I just wanted to clarify that. Now, I will be doing mostly solo episodes, at least for this season. It might even be only solo episodes. This might be the solo season. Season 8 might be the solo season. So let me unpack that. I'm going to share my current headspace for the podcast, if you will. So the solo episodes are really my thing. That's my baby. I enjoy them. I enjoy putting them together. I feel I have things to share. I feel like I have something to say. I enjoy the teaching component of it. Most of them, the solo episodes that is, are chess improvement based and deal with the reality of playing in over-the-board amateur tournaments, which is really what this podcast is all about. That's really the umbrella of this podcast, and people seem to really enjoy that approach. Now, by the way, this is as per a comment I think on Spotify somebody made. This podcast doesn't really focus on the professional scene as far as what's happening with top players. We may address it tangentially. Like I had the candidates episode with Danny Gormley. If there's a world championship going on, like we'll mention it, but we're not really about that pro level scene. This is really about the amateur level chess scene. That's why I started this podcast. That's what I'm into. That's what I enjoy talking about. There are other pods that focus on the pros, like the C Squared podcast, and I'll let them handle that because that's their thing. Also, quite honestly, I don't really follow the pros that closely. I'm not one of these people where every day I'm seeing what's going on with the pros and like following the moves and following live streams. I'm not really into that. And the solo episodes were always my intent from the start. Longtime listeners know that. I've said that many times. And many of you have emailed or messaged me saying you actually like the solo episodes more, which is interesting. And that's not like some lame humble brag. All right, I'm sure some of you prefer the guest episodes, and that's fine. That's human nature. You're not going to please everybody. But more people have told me they like the solo episodes than people have told me they like the interview episodes, which is interesting. Now, the solo episodes, that solo format, as well as my years of experience as a chess player, as a chess teacher, and as a tournament director, and someone who runs a chess club, I think that's something, or I know that's something that distinguishes this podcast from others out there and other content out there. Most have an interview format. If I'm being honest, it's a lot of the same people over and over, and the same structure is often repeated. A bio, a few tips, and buy my course, which is for all levels, right? Because every course, it's for all levels. If I'm being honest, there's also some chess content creators out there. And I'm talking about the chess content creation space in general, not just podcasts, YouTube, blogs, everything, the whole scene where, they've only played online and have never played in an over-the-board tournament, which to me is odd. Or they played in only like 1 or 2 OTB events, and yet they're doing content. I don't know. I'm just saying. One more comment on why I'm leaning towards solo episodes for me. And now this is just my opinion here. The adult improver episodes out there, and I'm talking about, again, everything, YouTube, podcasts, the scene in general. With those adult improver episodes, some of them, specifically the ones where the guest describes a rapid rise in rating in a relatively short amount of time, they're getting a little played out for me. And this could be over the board or online. Often when they reveal the key to their success, what they did to get that rating boost, it's often completely unrealistic for most of us. For example, it's revealed halfway through the episode that the person was able to put in like 7 hours a day of study. Okay, well, yeah, if you're doing that, but let's face it, the overwhelming majority of us, the overwhelming majority of adult improvers are not going to be able to come even close to that. Or you'll hear someone talk about, they took a leave of absence from work for their chess pursuits, which to me, maybe I sound like an old fuddy-duddy here, but that's not admirable. To me, that's kind of irresponsible. There are other examples I could give, but I'll stop there. Now, some of you are going to say, wait, Neal, I've heard some of these adult improvers talk about their progress where they didn't do anything really crazy. They didn't put in a tremendous amount of hours, and yet they still experienced a big rating jump. That's a fair point. My response to that is this. There are always going to be people on the far right of the bell curve. So those people who really didn't do anything crazy but still saw a big rating jump, those are the exceptions that prove the rule. You're always going to have people, I'll repeat what I just said, in all activities, not just chess, who are going to be on that far right side of the bell curve. That's always going to happen. But here's the reality. Most amateur players, adult improvers, club players, whatever term you want to use, regardless of how hard they work, are not going to see that type of rapid improvement. It's similar, for lack of a better analogy, it's similar to those weight loss infomercials, right? I lost 20 pounds on XYZ plan, and you see the before and after photos. I lost 50 pounds. But then you see at the bottom, results not typical. Most people will not see this type of weight, right? It's that type of thing. Now, I believe everyone can improve and get better, of course. But for most, that improvement is going to be slow and steady and not happen in a rapid amount of time or over a quick period of time. The other thing, most amateur players are not going to reach a rating of 2,000 in their lifetime. I haven't gotten there myself. This is over the board, that is. Online is a different ecosystem. I'm not going to get into that. So most players are not going to get to 2,000. That is a statistical reality that is not mentioned enough. Now, again, I haven't gotten there myself. I peaked at almost 1,900, little under 1,900 US chess. It's taken a dip. I'm slowly working my way back. Anyway, as I said earlier, at some point, I'm going to do a dedicated episode discussing my own personal rating trajectory, so I won't get into that now. But getting back to the realities of improvement, increasing your rating, most people aren't going to see tremendous gains in a short amount of time. That's the point. Now, yes, we all know, And I've seen this at my own club. We all know the player who just started playing chess, right? They've been playing 3, 4, 5 months. They start playing in tournaments. And yeah, within 6 months, they're already 1,800, right? I mean, don't you hate those guys? No, I don't hate those guys. Well, I mean, let's face it, that can be frustrating. Let's keep it honest. I admire that. But if you're, say, struggling to get better, it can be frustrating. But those players, the players who are getting to like 1,800, 1,900 after playing in just a few tournaments, again, those are the exceptions. Most people are not going to have that kind of rating trajectory. And as I've mentioned on this pod, natural innate talent for both the game itself and for handling tournament conditions is, I believe, a bigger factor than it's made out to be. Now, it's been said, and this has been said by reputable people in the chess world, that anyone can make master, or, anyone of average intelligence can make master if they do the work. I don't know that that's true, and the statistics certainly don't bear that out. I mean, I don't have them in front of me. I probably should have researched something on this, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. I mean, I think the amount of rated players, like I'll go by US chess here in the States, the amount of rated players who are rated 2,000 or above, I think it's less than 5%. It's definitely less than 10%, but I think it's like less than 5%, which means about 90 to 95% of US chess rated players are rated below 2,000. So just some statistics there, some things to think about there. That was a bit of a rant. I hope I didn't get too dark, but I just wanted to kind of speak about chess improvement philosophy and some of the things that are out there. I didn't mean to be negative. I know I was a little bit there, but I want to be realistic. And remember, the most important thing, this should be a fun, enjoyable process. Let's not forget that, okay? We can sometimes get so caught up in improvement that you want to remember it's supposed to be fun. So sorry if that was a little intense, but I wanted to share some thoughts on that. And our final segment, the King's Indian attack, is coming up after this short break. All right, for our final segment, we are going to discuss the King's Indian attack, which is a very solid system opening for white. Now, I want to be clear on the terms. This is the King's Indian attack. Do not confuse this with the King's Indian defense, which I'm sure you are familiar with. The King's Indian defense, as the name implies, is a defense for black against one d4. D is in David, where after d4, black goes knight f6, and then g6, bishop g7, he fiend kettles on the king side. Very, very popular at all levels. A lot of super GMs play it. Fischer played it. We've all heard of it. But the King's Indian defense is something else. This is the King's Indian attack, where white does something similar. He also fiend kettles on the king side, but a little bit different. Now, the King's Indian attack, again, it's a system opening. So let's review what that is for the uninitiated. A system opening is an opening where you're aiming to achieve a certain structure. You want certain pieces to end up on certain squares. You're aiming for a formation, and then you continue with a plan from there. And with system openings, because you're concerned about certain pieces ending up on certain squares, there's some flexibility in the move order. And as long as your pieces end up where they're supposed to be, you're fine. And the other thing with system openings is you can generally play them against anything your opponent throws at you. Now, most of you have heard of the London system, of course. That is probably the most popular and trending system opening right now. There's also the Kali system. We spoke about the Botvinnik system on this podcast. I have an episode on that. The Botvinnik system is based on one C4. The English opening, the London and the Kali are based on one D4. This system, the King's Indian attack, is based on knight f3, although you could start with e4. You could open with one e4 and go into this system. It's probably a little bit easier and a little more flexible if you do it with knight f3. Now, when you open with one knight f3, just a general comment, That is a very common and flexible opening as well. That can transpose into a lot of things. A lot of club players will open with one knight f3. Very common. It's usually referred to as the ready opening, RETI, one knight f3. I mean, there might be different names for it. I learned it as the ready opening. But this system, the King's Indian attack, will start with knight f3. You can also, again, do one e4. Now, what I did in the show notes, I gave a few quick sample lines, maybe 5 or 6 moves, just to get you started so you can plug that in and look at it. I also included some links of articles and a very good YouTube video that explains the King's Indian attack. Again, my usual disclaimer when I discuss openings, this is basically like a dictionary or a Wikipedia type of thing, right? It's audio only. I'm just going to give you the basic ideas, the basic structure. I'm not going to get into like variations in every nuance. I'm going to give you the basic idea, and if it's something you want to pursue, you can check it out. But a few things about this opening. People hear the word system opening, and sometimes there's like this stigma like, oh, that's for beginners, or it's not very good, or it's too passive. Not true at all. Even the other ones I mentioned, like the London system, the Botvinnik system, even GMs have played those. And we all know with the London, like Magnus uses it all the time. Now with this system, the King's Indian attack, Bobby Fischer played it quite a bit. It was more early in his career, but Fischer used it quite a bit. Botvinnik has played it. Petrosian has played it. More recently, I believe Caro-Kann has used it. GMs have used it. You don't see it that much on the Grandmaster scene now, but it's a very solid system. And of course, at the amateur level, it works very, very well. So let's talk about the structure that White aims to achieve and some of his plans. So what's going to happen is White generally opens with knight f3, and then similar to what Black does in the King's Indian defense, with the King's Indian attack, White's going to go knight f3, g3, bishop g2, castles, right? You could probably picture that. And then the knight on b1 goes to d2, right? Knight b d2. And then that's pretty much the basic structure. So your knights are on f3 and d2. Your kingside bishop is fianchettoed, so you have pawns on f2, g3, and h2. Your bishop's on g2, you castle. That's the basic structure. And then the idea is that you're going to push for e4. And very often you start a kingside attack because you then have that pawn chain on c2, d3, and e4, right? So your pawns are pointing towards your opponent's king, assuming he castles on that side, which he probably does. And then you can go for an attack. So again, speaking just in very basic, broad strokes, you're going to play for e4. Another idea for White is to then go knight to e1. The knight that's on f3, you go to e1 so that you can push f4. So the f4 idea is another thing that you can do. Now, from Black's point of view, Black will usually play for a queenside pawn storm. So what happens from the Black side, Black usually is going to play g6, bishop g7. He's going to fianchetto on the king side like he would in the King's Indian defense. And then he's going to play for b5, that b5 pawn push, So Black might do something like a6, rook b8, and then b5. So White is generally going to attack on the king side. Black is going to aim for queenside expansion. And those are just some general ideas. Now, one thing that White sometimes does, he'll play a4 so that he can challenge or prevent Black from playing b5. So these are some things to think about. But it basically becomes Black's queenside play versus White's kingside play. So that's the general idea. And again, being that this is a system opening, you can use it against anything. It tends to work very well against those sort of semi-open defenses. Against the French, it works well, or the Sicilian or the Caro-Kann. And some players, again, can open with e4. Like they'll play this system, they'll go 1 e4, and if Black plays the French, 1 e6, you can then go into the system that way. So you can, again, start with e4. Knight f3 is the more mainline way of doing it, but either one works. And again, White's going to look to get in e4, maybe go knight e1, push with f4, attack on the king side. those are some basic ideas. I don't want to get too much into the theory, but I'm just going to review the structure one more time. So white basically opens, again, the way black would with a King's Indian defense. Knight f3, g3, bishop g2, castles, knight b to d2. That's the basic idea. And then when he tries to get in e4, he'll move the knight on d2. He'll open up lines for the dark squared bishop. That's the basic structure. Black's plan is similar. He's also going to fiend Keto on the king side, but he's going to look for queenside play. He's going to try to get in b5, which he might prepare again with a6 and rook b8. Now, if you look at the show notes, if you look at the links, the explanatory articles I put there are very good. The YouTube video, it's I'm blanking on his name right now. He does a very good job. So the YouTube video helps. And it's pretty easy to learn the basic ideas. Obviously, as with any opening, you'd have to play several games to really understand it. But it's a system opening that you may be interested in. And again, it's sound, it's solid, it's theoretically sound as well. I wouldn't give an opening on this podcast if it was like really crazy, unless I was announcing it as such. You know, Fischer, all these top GMs have played it. So if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. But at the amateur level, it can be an excellent, excellent idea. I mean, the truth is all openings offer chances at the amateur level, right? That's a quote from somebody. But this is something you may want to look into, the King's Indian attack. We had a guy here on Long Island. This was years and years ago. I don't know if he's still around, if he's still in New York, but shout out to Gene Jarva. Really, really good guy. I don't know what his deal is. I haven't seen him in many, many years, but he played this all the time, the King's Indian attack. And he was like a solid 1700 club player, which at the amateur level, that's a pretty high rating. He did very well with this. I remember I played a few games with him. Again, this is probably 15 or more years ago. I'm going back quite a bit. But he used this exclusively as white and did very well. And again, you can use it pretty much against anything black throws at you. So something to look into. Again, check out the links in the show notes if you want more information on it. But I wanted to give just a basic overview of this idea, which I think is very solid. So that will do it for this week. As always, thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. A reminder, next week's episode is going to be about faulty study plans or ineffective tools and exercises that players use, in my opinion. I've addressed that before on this podcast, but I'm going to be taking sort of a different tack or different approach next week. So that'll be coming up. Have a wonderful week, and I hope you win your next game.